Gentlemen, my name is Janet Stewart. I have the pleasure and the great honour of introducing and chairing this evening's Castle Lecture with Sir Nicholas Serota, who we're really delighted is joining us here in Durham. Very delighted to see so many of you out here this evening. Delighted as well that the weather has decided to turn in favour of tonight's event as well and be rather more encouraging than it was at the weekend. You'll find on your seats a number of leaflets. This event is part of a Castle Lecture series. You'll find on your seat a leaflet that will actually tell you a little bit more about the other lectures which are planned for the remainder of this particular season. You'll also see there a leaflet giving you some further information about the next art event which is happening here at Castle. Castle has a very lively programme of art events curated by Hazel Donkin, who was welcoming you all here and who's standing at the back at the moment. And last but not least, you'll also see there a leaflet listing the events which are being organised this year by the Centre for Visual Arts and Culture, and we're delighted that the President Director of the Centre for Visual Arts and Culture, Ludmila Georgianova, is with us this evening as well. So, I know you've all come here not to listen to me talk, but to listen to Nicholas talk. But just allow me a couple of words in introduction before I hand over. The format of this evening is that we will listen to a talk. We'll be sure to leave time at the end for questions. I'm sure there will be many of those which will emerge in the course of this evening's proceedings. So Nicholas, of course, he is someone who needs really no introduction. His many achievements in the cultural sphere precede him and will be known to all of us here in the audience this evening. Indeed, many of us here professionally owe much of our work to his pioneering work in the cultural sphere here in Britain, and in particular in engaging audiences in Britain in the service of modern and contemporary art, which of course he did during his tenure as director of the Tate. That tenure spanned 29 years, started while the Berlin Wall was still up, and ended just after that EU referendum that I will not mention any further this evening. Over that time, the achievements were huge. We saw the rebranding of Tate Britain. We saw, of course, the development of the Tate Modern. We saw the provocative conversations that were sparked throughout Britain by, for example, the Turner Prize. We saw the expansion of the Tate to St Ives following the previous expansion to Liverpool. And we also saw the network of Tate Plus, which takes Tate to 35 other institutions and locations across Britain and Northern Ireland. It's an extraordinary achievement, an extraordinary legacy in many ways. But of course, that's not all, because the current role that Sir Nicholas holds is as Chair of the Arts Council England. And in that role, of course, he's responsible not only for the visual arts, but also for music, for theatre, for literature, and for dance. And in taking on that role, of course, he draws on a wide range of expertise, not only in the role as director of Tate, but also in other directorships and senior roles within organisations such as the BBC or indeed the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment. As chair of the Arts Council England, he really is and has always been, of course, a prominent commentator on art. Tireless, I would say, in his desire to show that and how art matters, how art can change the world, how, for example, art can and should respond productively and effectively to pressing global challenges. When it comes to the environment, he wrote in The Guardian in November last year, time is fast running out. We have to accelerate our response to the threats. The arts has an important role in helping society to face up to the challenge of climate change and create a more sustainable future for us all. We're really delighted that as chair of the Arts Council, he's currently working with Durham University as co-chair of the Durham Commission on Creativity and Education. And his talk tonight takes up a central theme of the Commission's deliberations, reflecting on the need to encourage and develop the creative thinkers equipped precisely to meet the challenges and the opportunities of our age and to secure a future, a sustainable, a successful future for us all. No pressure. The title of his talk this evening is The Creative Opportunity. And without further ado, Sir Nicholas, I'll invite you to address us.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Thank you for that very warm welcome. And I think I should begin by explaining that I take no credit for the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I take no responsibility for the result of the referendum. I'm here today, and it really is a great honour to be here in Durham, because when I arrived at the Arts Council, about 2 years ago, it became clear to me that one of the most pressing issues that was of great concern to many people in the arts and culture and museums and libraries was a sense that the place of the arts in schools was under pressure, notably and particularly, of course, in secondary schools, and particularly for young people aged 14 to 16, where the introduction of the EBAC had, as it seemed to many people in the arts, put particular pressure on the timetable and had meant that fewer students were taking examinations in art subjects. That itself is disputed, of course, by government and by some people. But I think, and they explain the reduction in the number of art subjects in a number of different ways other than pressure. But the fact remained that many people in the arts felt very concerned about this. And yet I felt, looking at it, that it was a bigger and wider question than simply the question of whether young people between the ages of 14 and 16 were studying very specific art subjects. It was about the whole education system and the way it had been moving. It was about the pressure to learn fact and gain knowledge rather than thinking about interpretation and thinking about approaching subjects in many different ways. And so it seemed to me that we needed to step back and that we needed to think about the whole education of young people. Very fortunately, we encountered some colleagues in Durham who were interested in working with us. And I have to begin really by saying that the response of Stuart Corbridge as Vice-Chancellor, and then Jane Robinson, who was working with him at that time, and most notably, of course, the response that we've had from Professor Alan Houston and Professor Simon James, has made working with Durham really both a stimulating and a very enjoyable experience, I have to say. I speak halfway through the process, and I speak at a moment when, if I'm really honest with you, the pain is about to begin. That pain is not coming from Durham. That pain is coming, as with any commission, where you set up a whole set of propositions and you then have to decide which are the ones that are really important to address and agree that some will be put on one side. Anyway, as I say, it has been really a great pleasure to be working with colleagues in Durham. And I'm going to begin by showing you a short film which features some members of the Durham Commission speaking about
for an awful lot of children, especially those disadvantaged children, they just don't have access to the formal arts in the way that their better off peers do, but also they often don't have the experiences around them that help build that confidence and the skills.
If schools could spend some time talking and being really clear about what they mean by arts and culture, then hopefully those gaps would be minimised.
The Commission, I think, for me, will seek to make creativity something that all children, especially disadvantaged children, feel that they can call their own and make part of their life.
hope the Commission will achieve a call to action across a whole range of organisations.
Those things all raising the aspirations and life chances of children and young people, irrespective of where they have started from in life.
Well, I was very lucky. My parents were passionate about the arts. So even though I was a scientist, I've always kept an involvement in the arts. The arts in particular can contribute to tackling the challenges that this country faces.
Learning to play an instrument physically and to perform in front of other people has been immensely valuable in making me think about my medical and academic work in terms of performance.
The key is removing obstacles to that creativity. I think interrogating things, turning them on their head, asking what if, or why not, or why shouldn't we?
Most important strand for me, for children to have the opportunities to create, to have a go, to make mistakes, to learn. And for this they need time and they need space. And so often in schools things are so rushed.
There is a tremendous energy and creativity going on countrywide. At the same time, there are fears that our education is not providing for the ability of students to respond to the challenges of the future. The important thing is that they begin to think about the place of creativity in the education of youth in England.
So the people that you've been watching, listening to, come from business, from education, medicine, scientific research, as well as the arts and academia. And you've saw Anne Longfield, Children's Commissioner, Rena Keeble, very distinguished primary head, Paul Roberts, one-time Director of Education in Nottingham and an educationalist, Jackie O'Hanlon, who is head of learning at the Royal Shakespeare Company, Bob Kerslake was Chief Executive of Sheffield, then became effectively head of the Civil Service, Roger Kneebone, Professor of Medicine at Imperial College in London, Kat Pugh, head of St Marylebone School, and many of you will recognise the final speaker was Professor Alan Houston from Durham University. I think they were giving a message about the urgent importance of creative thinking and practice for young people, for our society, and indeed for the world. And it's a message that affects, I think, all our lives, not just employment and economic success, but also the sense of our own identity, our health and our well-being. And I want to talk today about that message. So, why is this message important today? It's a message that's echoed by governments, business leaders, researchers, and educators across the world. And they're all saying we must act now to develop the creativity of future generations. Because the challenges and change that we face as individuals, as societies, and as a species require new thinking. We need to become more adaptive. And because this change is driven by technology, we also need to become more human, developing the creative aspects that give us the lead over the machines that we build. So, who's talking about creativity? It's remarkable how many people are. This message is coming from global businesses. It's coming from, like, the World Economic Forum. It's coming from international social development bodies, such as UNESCO. From international educational bodies, like PISA, the Programme for International Student Assessment, run by the OECD, and which will include creative thinking as one of the subjects of its assessment from 2021. In the UK, the CBI recognises the importance of creativity to our economic future, as does the All-Party Design and Innovation Group. The message from employers is that they want creative people who can respond positively to change. The employment platform LinkedIn aggregates its data to create an economic graph. It's a digital representation of the global economy based on 590 million members, 50,000 skills, 30 million companies, 20 million open jobs, and 84,000 schools. And they identify that cloud computing, which is a hard skill, is the skill that is most sought after, but that creativity is now the second most sought after competency in a potential employee. So what's different about the Durham Commission? There have been other campaigns, commissions and reports on creativity in education. But this commission is looking at the potential of creativity from both ends. It's thinking about the importance of creativity in the development of young people from childhood into adulthood, but also what creativity will mean in their relationship with the wider world. The commission has consulted widely and nationally, and that consultation is continuing. And there are 4 areas that members are now thinking about: economic growth, skills and social mobility. Secondly, community identity and social engagement. Thirdly, personal fulfillment and well-being. They're asking themselves, if we want to see economic growth, if we want to consolidate community identity, if we want people to have richer lives and have a real sense of personal fulfillment and well-being, what is it that we need to have within our education system? What are the expectations that we have of schools and teachers that will produce the creativity that will allow us to develop in these 3 principal areas? Education, as everyone in this room will certainly recognize, is a funnel. We all pass through it. It has to reflect the needs of the current generation, and it must anticipate the competencies that they will require in the future. Simply to give people the skills to live in 2020 is not enough. We have to equip them to think about the skills they will need in 2030, 40, 50, 60, 70. So the Commission is really trying to think about how do we develop creativity in our schools in a way that will help all young people live richer and fuller lives. The Commission is thinking about an education for life. But with so many interested parties, and you've seen the range of people on the Commission, they've all got different viewpoints. What do we mean by creativity? So concepts of creativity are informed by culture, context and application. The Dharan Commission has been working with a very simple definition of creativity. It's a working definition. It certainly doesn't touch every aspect of creativity, but it says creativity is an ability to make or conceive a solution that wasn't there before. It's a very simple idea. But out of that, so much can come. I think too often, creativity is regarded as an ability that is innate. Either you have it, or you don't. The extent to which it can be encouraged or nurtured is not really recognized. We, that is the Commission, think that it is a human ability that we all have and that we can cultivate through skills, knowledge, and values. Out in the world, creativity takes many forms. It might look like the ability to adapt to new ways of working. For instance, to matrix working or reverse monitoring as adopted by PricewaterhouseCoopers, a process in which young people teach older generations digital skills. It might mean new or hybrid practices, such as the Google approach of combining work and play. It might mean new or hybrid approaches to disciplines, such as the exploration of manual skills and dexterity in the performance of surgery, and how that can help us get better outcomes for patients, as our colleague on the Commission, Professor Roger Kneebone, is doing. But it must mean that we produce researchers, scientists, engineers, designers, and entrepreneurs who can deconstruct existing paradigms. People who are attracted by the scale of a challenge and have the confidence to take risk. We must also look to creativity as a source of values. We believe that it can help produce young people who have imagination and empathy, who are inspired to care for each other. And in a world that is attracted to the apparent simplicity of binary options, we need people who can appreciate and shape communities that can maintain social cohesion while recognizing many points of view. So what's our understanding of the role of creativity in education? As part of its work, the Durham Commission asked Britain Thinks to do a survey of attitudes towards creativity amongst headmasters and school governors. There was an overwhelming agreement about the importance of creativity. Respondents associated it with skills that could be applied across all subjects in the curriculum and in wider life. Those skills to which I've already referred: problem solving, original thinking, better expression, communication, confidence, and resilience. There was less clarity about how this could be formalized. How can we build this into our education system? There's a growing body of opinion in education that is moving towards regarding creativity as a competency that embraces technical skills and interpersonal attributes, and has an ethical dimension. Research shows that there are initiatives that seem to favor the development of creativity within formal education. Building on a foundation of basic knowledge, these include encouraging a depth of study in a discipline that takes learners beyond their immediate experiences or observations, providing structured time to develop creative habits and shaping an environment in which learners can go beyond what is expected of them, allowing time to think about alternative ways of being and doing, having time and space to play and explore safely, to take risks and to fail. These are some of the conditions that seem to help. And it's noticeable that they describe an added sense of dimension. They're about taking things a step further. They explore subjects in depth, import these into the imagination of students, and give them the confidence to run with their own ideas. They give the power of agency and control to young people. And I'd say it's also noticeable that these are skills, ways of thinking about subjects that apply not just to the art subjects, but to the full range of disciplines within the curriculum. In our survey, many head teachers thought that there would be a cost obstacle when it came to prioritizing creativity. But the creative teaching scenarios they described and the skills they sought seemed to be as much a matter of approach as of money. Many schools were already finding ways of bringing creativity into the classroom. Given the encouragement from policymakers, they could have the confidence to go further and try more, even within the existing curriculum. We also know that creativity and creative thinking requires that we make connections, and this in turn demands concentration as well as play. This seems very relevant to our relationship with technology, which now dominates the lives and consciousness of young people, arguably to an unhealthy degree. Technology both facilitates and stifles creativity. We cannot ignore such an extraordinary tool, but we are also learning how that it can turn young people into passive consumers with problems of poor concentration and low self-esteem. We need to have a different relationship with technology, understanding it as an aspect of our social and cultural lives, rather than the medium in which we live, or, still more troubling, which lives within us. Building a more confident, disciplined, and creative mindset may be one way we can deal with the issues of technology and social media addiction. And as I said, creativity gives us control and reinforces what is human about us. So what is the place of arts and culture in the teaching of creativity? While our survey of head teachers showed a consensus about the importance of creativity, some felt more strongly than others about the role of traditional art subjects. Overall, there was strong support for bringing creative disciplines learned from art subjects into the curriculum as a whole, and for more cross-curricular learning generally. Research shows that both in the popular imagination and within the UK education system, there's been a perception that creativity is bound up with the arts in an exclusive way. Creativity has been regarded as the province of a non-academic mind that produces a few brilliant performers, composers, artists, and writers. However, I believe we're beginning to see a shift to a more cross-curricular understanding of the importance of the arts, of art subjects to all people, as we have for the sciences. We know that research shows that art subjects can influence outcomes within the wider curriculum, just as the wider curriculum can inform the arts. And speaking with my Arts Council hat on, we share concerns, as I've said earlier, that the narrowing and loss of art subjects from the curriculum after the age of 14 is really causing serious problems. We're also conscious of the difficulty that many students from earliest years onwards have in accessing quality and affordable arts and culture provision, both within and without school. And this is especially true for children whose parents were unable to pursue their education beyond school. We'll continue to advocate for the importance of a broad curriculum, including art subjects, and believe that a wider understanding of their relevance will support the case. They are resources from which people draw their inspiration for creativity. The arts are not soft subjects. They offer a disciplined route to the acquisition of creative skills and the development of creativity as a competency. And while continuing to stress their cultural significance, we do wish to draw a stronger connection between the arts and the wider world. We want to see greater awareness in schools for the career opportunities in the fast-growing creative industries that can open up for students who have qualifications in these subjects. But we also want to see art subjects used to give young people greater agency and the creative competence, knowledge, and cultural capital that they will need to succeed in life. So what might that agency, that sense of confidence and control look like? What humans do well is to tell stories. Narrative and various forms of narrative, whether the plays of Shakespeare, the Harry Potter books, the lyrics of a song, a sequence of chords or choreographic moves, a combination of brushstrokes, or a film of moving images. All these are narratives. If you can tell a story, you can join the dots and exercise some degree of control over your world. You can describe the past, and you can begin to imagine a future. So what might the creative application of narrative look like in an education environment? To answer this, I'd just like to talk for a few minutes about the work of Grimm & Company in Rotherham. Rotherham, a once prosperous industrial town that has for years been characterized in the media as the epitome of economic decline, with a tragic history of child abuse. Some of you may know already something about Grimm & Company. It has a national and an international reputation. And here you see a slide of the interior of Grimm & Company. It isn't a school, though it works with many schools. It's a shop and a writer's centre on a high street that promotes and teaches the art of storytelling to young people. It's funded by the Arts Council together with business sponsorship, charitable donations, and income from online retail. It employs 6 full-time staff and relies on a rotating cast of 18 local artists and 67 trained volunteers. While the shop front is designed like a magical apothecary's store from a child's fantasy, the company is a social realist player within its community, liaising with schools throughout the region to benefit under-resourced pupils and working with civic leaders to regenerate the town centre in Rotherham. Deborah Bullivant, its founder and director, describes it as a writer's centre that champions the artist in every child. I'll show you a few slides of just how it does champion. So this is the interior. It is quite a fantastical place. And they have a wonderful way of making all kinds of objects that are just have to be bought. And here is one. If anyone would like to take a little extract of genius, I brought a bottle with me. And on it, the label tells me that the ingredients include the crystallized brain cells from the top 10 human thinkers, 4 of whom came from Durham University. Poached owl earwax. Amongst the possible side effects, others become invisible, and a desire to collect stamps for some reason. Anyway, if anyone would like an extract of genius, you can purchase it later. It is a remarkable organisation. So Rotherham's post-industrial neglect and the painful history of child abuse in that town are, of course, facts. But why should a town and its young people be always defined by this history? Not what the town is, and it's not who they are. Their storytelling explores how the individual imagination can change the world around it. In the summer of 2017, the shop organised a 3-week programme called the Embassy for Reimagining Rotherham, in which the children drafted a manifesto of how they wanted their town centre to look. And they chose to give an emphasis to arts, leisure and green spaces. That was not something they were instructed to do, that's what they chose to do. And the manifesto was then presented to a delegation of politicians, architects and local business leaders. Grimm's impact creates ripples. As one local authority worker puts it, there's a danger of being defined by a single narrative, particularly in the case of Rotherham. Grimm is producing new stories, empowering children to create a new future and a narrative that's theirs. Art helps to make sense of the past and is a nice place to escape to, but it's also about self-actualization. It's about imagining things as they might be and then making it true. That's a local authority worker. So exploring our creativity takes us from thinking about narrative to self-realization and shaping the world around us. An organisation like Grimm & Company cannot heal all the wounds or substitute for proper intervention or even investment, but it can encourage that precious sense of agency. And there are signs that Grimm & Company is already having a broader effect within Rotherham, with changes in the high street around Grimm itself and a more positive attitude in those who have been touched by its work. It has, as I've said, a growing international reputation. Last year, they were visited by a high-level delegation from Shaanxi province in China, including the province's educational leaders. The visitors came to learn about Grimm's approach and philosophy, its impact on children and young people, and its work with teachers. The visitors said that Grimm and Company showed why the UK had led the way in creativity, why we can produce the pioneers, the designers, the engineers, the entrepreneurs, the musicians and the artists. They felt that China's approach to education had been successful in creating studious scholars, but they needed to encourage a more individual and creative mindset to sustain their record of change and growth. They needed to develop thinkers, creators, designers, engineers, people with imagination, which is why they'd come to Grimm and Company. They needed more of what it does well, an education that develops creative talent and equips young people from every background with an initiative and skills to help them fashion their own narratives. The work of Grimm and Company and organizations like them seems relevant to the debate around cultural literacy, inspired by the eminent American educationalist E.D. Hirsch. Hirsch is often presented as a champion of disciplined learning. Indeed, I've heard the Minister for School Standards in the present government say exactly that. Refer to Hirsch. Hirsch will give you the answers. Hirsch is regarded as a champion of disciplined learning in core subjects, and in recent years, his thinking has influenced our own education system, as I've suggested. Hirsch argues that the shared knowledge of key cultural works is critical to the inclusion of young people in a national society. Creation of what is regarded as a tribe that crosses barriers of class, ethnicity, and income, and makes every child an insider. So it's an anthropological view of education, but I don't think that it denies the importance of individual creative development. 2 years ago, Hirsch did a fascinating interview for our own Arts Council Create platform, in which he emphasized the dynamic elements of cultural literacy. How it is about acquiring life-changing skills and opportunities, as well as language and knowledge. He wanted the cultural opportunities of the private sector to be offered to every child. As he said, the great leftist thinker Gramsci insisted that all children should attend a common school that induces cultural competence. Gramsci, said Hirsch, was amazingly prescient in seeing that this knowledge should not remain the sole possession of the elite, but should be offered to every child. The British problem of social stagnation and diminished educational opportunity has a strong correlation with the cultural advantage that Hirsch touches on. Hirsch remarked how the arts play a big role in the best national curriculums of the world, and often with surprising results. In Japan, more time is spent on the arts than on science in the early grades, and yet Japan scores top in science in the PISA rankings. How do you explain that? Start by learning about the art subjects, you develop an interest in science, and you're better at science for having had that foundation in the arts, is what he's saying. This, as Hirsch argued, was a key policy issue in the United States, where he thought that the neglect of the arts, poetry, and history in the pursuit of better scores in maths and reading, and the narrowing of the school curriculum had caused the reading scores of 17-year-olds to decline. A broad curriculum, including the arts, poetry, history, and civics, is the best means, he said, to form good readers and competent citizens. For Hirsch, narratives and aesthetic structures are ways of making sense of new experiences. Narrative and poetry, as he said, have always been the great teachers of mankind. Learned culture leads to individual creativity, and individuality is the fruit of mastering the conventions. In essence, we can do more than simply quote a cultural canon. When we master its techniques, we can express ourselves and better shape our world. We learn so that we can learn how to be different. That's what storytelling can do, as the experience of Grimm & Company so powerfully demonstrates. As an aside, I might add that in his interview, Hirsch also made the novel proposal that universities should devise the curriculum. National culture making, he said, is an implicit function of university humanities departments. Their curricular recommendations could carry trust amongst parents and citizens if they put their minds to it. Now there's a challenge to the humanities department of the Durham University. So I ask myself, is it more important that schools prepare students for exams or for life? The two are not the same. One may last an hour, the other half a century. One is a painful, brief, and solitary experience. The other involves becoming a member of society. A recent announcement by the Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, that she's considering introducing a new Ofsted framework shows that we are beginning to think beyond exams to how education can prepare people to be active, respectful, and responsible citizens. It is looking at the quality of education, leadership and management, and behaviour and attitudes alongside personal development. The new framework is likely to position formal education more as an education for life, a position surprisingly similar to that of the Dharan Commission. And I hope, therefore, that we might be moving to a more common understanding here in the United Kingdom, that we have a shared aspiration for the education of our young people in which the arts could play a more active role, helping to embed creativity as an essential life competence. How we measure that success is, of course, a vital area for future debate. We've advanced faster than I had anticipated. There we are. So the Dharan Commission, as I said, still has a great deal of ground to cover before it presents its recommendations later this year. We're currently looking at the significance of creativity for our economy, for social engagement, for personal fulfillment, and for well-being, and its implications for education. Later this summer, we hope to see practical policy recommendations emerging. Meanwhile, the Arts Council is developing its own 10-year strategy for the period 2020 to 2030. For the past year, we've been consulting widely about people's attitudes and the place of the arts and culture in their lives. This consultation showed that there is a public appetite for greater engagement and more participation, for stronger ties between the arts and the cultural world, and the everyday lives and creativity of people, not just young people. We're learning too more about the impact of art and culture across people's health and well-being, their prosperity, their civic life, and their education. Too many people still cannot access the art and culture that we support. We must go and meet them where they live, where they work, and where they play, and listen more to their expectations and ambitions. We must do more to connect art to life. And I think this relates very closely to what we're learning from the Dharan Commission. There's a pattern to the great changes in history. They're foreseen, they're discussed, they're disputed, but at first, changes are almost imperceptible. The water slowly cools around our feet, but then a turning point is reached and change comes with a shocking speed in a flood. In some ways, our imagination is our enemy as well as our ally. It is in the nature of humans that we can hold several different, often contrary beliefs and narratives in our head at the same time. We choose the one that suits us best at any particular moment. But our salvation also lies in the power of creativity, in that imagination, invention, and resourcefulness. We need to look forward to conditions that will prevail in the world when our children grow up, and we need to decide what we can do to best equip them to shape that world. In the face of change, we need to be more human, not less. We need to be agile in our response to challenges. In a word, we need to be more creative.